giving us amazing pictures of galaxies far away. You know, most people would be hard-pressed to even learn about Project Paperclip.
I think the important thing to know about the space program today and about NASA is that they are essentially a foil. They are essentially a facade. The Pentagon runs the space program today in America, and the idea of a civilian space agency is just the public relations gimmick. A couple directors ago at NASA, a guy by the name of Sean O'Keefe, he had been the former Secretary of the Navy. He was a nuclear specialist. And when he became the director of NASA, in his opening news conference, he said, every mission we fly at NASA is dual use. Everything we do is both military and civilian at the same time.
So, shifting gears here a little bit, could you explain how some of these programs that are out there, the different satellites and all the different ideas for nuclear propulsion in space, how do they affect our atmosphere? How do they affect the environment of our planet?
Well, they've been using nuclear power in space since the early days, since the 1960s. And in fact, in the early 60s, a U.S. military satellite called SNAP-9A had 2 pounds of plutonium on it. It fell back to Earth and burned up on reentry and spread the plutonium as dust. The plutonium was carried across the planet by the winds as this dust particles, inhaled by the people into our lungs. And scientists like John Goffman, one of the founders of uranium, he studied that particular accident and believes it's one of the major reasons for the increases in cancer around the world today. And so since the 60s, there have been other accidents by the U.S. and the former Soviet Union where they were using uranium on some of their military satellites. So several times over the years, there have been accidents where these highly toxic, highly radioactive spacecraft have failed and fallen back to Earth and spread their waste on the Earth. If you go to our website, spaceforpeace.org, spaceforpeace.org, we have a section where you can look at those accidents. The most recent accident, in 1996, the Russians launched a Mars mission with 0.5 pound of plutonium on it. It failed to achieve its proper orbit and fell back to Earth and burned up as it re-entered Earth's atmosphere. A NASA scientist just happened to be in the mountains of Chile and Bolivia at the time on a stargazing expedition, and he saw the flaming re-entry. The countries of Bolivia and called the United States, President Clinton at the time, and asked if we would send radiological teams into the mountains there so they could discover where the contamination was, because they didn't have that technology, they didn't have that capability. The United States, Bill Clinton, refused to send in radiological teams. Why? Because they wanted the story dead. They didn't want the media to cover the story. And as it turned out, only 2 newspapers in the United States reported on it. One was the Boston Globe, and the other one was the Christian Science Monitor. To this day, we don't know the extent of the contamination that happened. The reason why Clinton killed that was because the very next year, in 1997, they launched the Cassini mission that carried 72 pounds of plutonium-238 on board. And our organization created a intense international campaign to oppose that launch, taking that campaign out all over the world, organizing people from all over the planet to oppose the launching of plutonium. Because if there had been an accident with 72 pounds of plutonium, it would have been devastating for the entire planet. But the nuclear industry today views space as a new market. They want to put nuclear power mining colonies on the moon and Mars. They want to build nuclear powered rockets to cut in half the amount of time it takes to get to faraway planets like Mars.
What is your organization currently involved in current events on these kind of things? What's happening right now?
Well, the big issue is what we talked about earlier, the U.S. encirclement of Russia and China, particularly using these so-called missile defense systems that are coordinated by military space satellites that are actually part of the Star Wars program. And so the United States is now deploying these systems. In the case of China, where the U.S. is deploying them in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, on Navy ships. Aegis destroyers are being outfitted with these missile defense systems. And so China is being encircled with them. At the same time, NATO is expanding and U.S. is building military bases encircling Russia. And these same missile defense systems are now being put into Poland, into Bulgaria, Romania. They want to put them in Georgia. All countries just right along, if you will, the borders of Russia. And of course, this is absolutely insane. This will create a whole new arms race. And you might remember soon after he got elected president, Obama went to Prague in the Czech Republic where he made a speech saying he wanted to negotiate with Russia. He wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons. Well, at the same time he said that, he's now expanding this encirclement of Russia. If Russia and China today were building military bases in Mexico and in Canada and putting ships just off our east and west coast, we would go bananas here in the United States. We would virtually declare war against them. But we're doing the same thing to them, and no one even knows about it in the United States of America.
Well, it's just like the little war that erupted there in Georgia, like you spoke of. It came out on all the news media. They said, Russia attacked first and everything. Then it all comes out weeks later that no, it was a sneak attack done at the behest of American military professionals and advisors, Israeli military advisors, NATO advisors, and it was all an operation done on their part. And Russia was only defending parts of their own country.
One important piece to add to that is who was the first American politician to visit Georgia after that all happened. His name, at that time, Senator Joseph Biden, who later then became Vice President of the United States of America. And so you see how this foreign policy, this aggressive encirclement of Russia and China, is agreed upon by both parties. And so this idea that Obama is going to be better than John McCain, Obama won't do what John McCain does, is not true at all. Obama, in fact, continues the policies of the Bush administration.
Our last episode we did was on the false left-right paradigm a couple episodes ago, and it was a discussion of exactly that, how both parties are run by these same elite interests, and they follow the same line, essentially, no matter who's in power.
As long as we allow ourselves to get sucked into that, it's like a black hole, It's never ending, and it just uses up our energy. We run around from election to election. Oh, this one is a little bit better than that one. And we never then really deal with the fundamental questions about control of an oligarchy, a loss of democracy in our country. The reason why we're having a collapsing economy today is because of military spending. 52 cents out of every one of our tax dollars going into the Pentagon for endless war. We're spending $12 billion a month on these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan. And just today I read an article about coming out of the National Governors Association where they say that 45 states collectively have an $18 billion of fiscal crisis. They're in the hole by $18 billion, and now they've got to have even more social spending and education cuts. But that's about what we spend in 2 months or a month and a half in these wars today. So people need to focus like a laser on these things.
I was hoping maybe you could share with us some of the victories that you've had in your experience.
Like you, I'm motivated by my concern for the future generations. I'm motivated by my concern for the truth. And I do find that every now and then something good will happen. More and more people in the mainstream are beginning to get the picture. And to me, that is a victory in and of itself. I've been an organizer now for 30-some years. And I've never seen people as open as they are today about discussing some of these issues. We've started a campaign here in Maine, where I live, called Bring Our War Dollars Home. And we are now working hard to get the local politicians, the school board officials, the town councilors, the state representatives and state senators to begin to make demands on Washington. Have them begin to see that war spending is a local issue. You can't separate the two, that you have to connect the state fiscal crisis with war spending. And this is really important for us, that we have to go out and find people and nurture people who have the courage of their convictions and are willing to break away a little bit from the status quo. And each time that happens, I feel that it's a major victory for us. That means that something good is happening out there, and we have to keep pursuing it. I believe in the end that the most important job of a human being is to make sure that the future generations have a chance to survive on the Mother Earth. And so everything we do in our life has to, I think, be about making sure that that happens. And what's happening all over the world is the same corporate domination of politics that we see here in America. And the only way that's going to change is if we begin to organize internationally. You have to make contact with people your age around the world and see that the issues are very similar, and that we have to build movements that connect internationally. If we realize that we don't have to do this alone, if we're part of a global movement, then things can in fact change. And history tells us that every now and then something can really break through. The Berlin Wall can come down. Things can happen. So we have to be moving, we have to be organizing, we have to have people ready, we have to project a real vision for the future. We have to talk about converting the military-industrial complex to peaceful production, building rail systems and a solar society and wind turbines, things like that will create more jobs that are good for the environment, good for the planet, help us solve for climate change. Those are the kind of things that we need to be talking about. So even though everything is really bad, we can also project a more positive vision for the future. But I think people understand in their heart and will also want to be a part of.
Absolutely. So in that sense, what do you think of the International Space Station? Do you think that that is an example of countries being able to work together? Do you think that it's dominated by any one country? What's the real deal with the International Space Station?
It's dominated by the United States. The only reason why we brought the partners in was to help us pay for it. Originally, it was supposed to cost $10 billion. It's not complete, and the price tag has grown to $100 billion. So and this is the way all space technology systems are. All of them are hundreds of % over budget, because launching these systems is astronomically expensive. You know, my own position, I'm not really against space exploration, but I'm also in favor of prioritizing. We have a planet here, a beautiful, beautiful planet, Earth, that I actually love living on. It's like a little satellite flying through space, and we've got to take care of it. Now, the Mars Society says that the Earth is a rotting, dying, stinking planet, and that we have to move our civilization to Mars. And they're lobbying Congress to appropriate money to terraform Mars. Now, you know what terraform means?
Yes.
It means turning the red, dusty planet into a green, luscious, beautiful planet like Earth.